A Chinese electric pickup truck is now certified for Canadian sale at $38,000, while a base Ford F-150 Lightning sits at $74,000 and qualifies for a federal rebate the Chinese truck does not. That gap is $36,000. What I call the Canadian truck trap is already closing, and which American nameplate goes first will surprise you. Name the concept. Anchor in Canadian data. Tell viewers what position they're in. Here is what the data actually shows. Canadian new vehicle sales hit 1.97 million units in 2025, according to the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association. Pickup trucks remain the single largest segment, roughly 23% of all sales. The F-Series Ram 1500 and Silverado have held that podium for over a decade, but three forces are converging simultaneously right now, in 2026, that have never overlapped before. Chinese brands have cleared Transport Canada's Motor Vehicle Safety Act certification process. The federal government's Chinese EV tariff sits at 100%, but that wall has a crack. And the traditional truck buyer, the 55-plus high-income Canadian who's owned 4 or 5 F-Series trucks in a row, is for the first time seriously looking at alternatives. What I call the Canadian truck trap works like this. American brands built their entire margin structure on the assumption that no credible truck competitor would arrive before 2030. They priced accordingly. They cut feature content, they delayed electrification. And now, while they were holding the line, 3 Chinese manufacturers cleared Canadian certification, opened distribution discussions with existing dealer networks, and arrived with full-size trucks priced $15,000 to $36,000 below the American equivalent. This is not a future threat. The trucks are here. The question is which American nameplates survive it, and which ones don't make it through the year. Let's go through them. Ford F-150 Lightning, the brand that overpromised and underdelivered. Ford lost approximately $5.1 billion on its EV division in 2024 alone, roughly $44,000 for every electric vehicle it sold that year. The F-150 Lightning accounted for a significant portion of that loss. In Canada, the F-150 Lightning starts at $74,495 Canadian dollars before any options. Ford Canada's planned 2026 production volumes for Lightning were quietly revised downward twice in the last 8 months, according to Automotive News Canada. The Ontario EV rebate program, which was cut in 2018 under Premier Doug Ford and never restored, means Lightning buyers in the country's largest province are paying full sticker. Transport Canada's most recent registration data shows Lightning volumes in Canada running roughly 60% below Ford's own 2024 projections. At $74,495 Canadian dollars, the Lightning competes directly against the GWM Canon EV, which is now cleared for Canadian sale and priced at approximately $48,000 to $52,000 Canadian dollars, depending on trim. The federal IZEV rebate of up to $5,000 applies to the GWM, but not to the Lightning. The Lightning exceeds the $55,000 MSRP cap on the base trim and loses eligibility entirely on anything above it. Net effective cost to a Toronto buyer: $74,495 for the Lightning versus approximately $43,000 to $47,000 for the GWM Canon EV after rebate. That is a real-world gap of $27,000 to $31,000 for a truck that in several independent range tests matched the Lightning within 40 kilometers. Mark Therian, a semi-retired contractor from Barrie, Ontario, ordered an F-150 Lightning Pro in 2023 with a 14-month wait. By the time it arrived, the model he ordered had been repriced upward by $4,200 Canadian dollars. He took delivery, then listed it 6 months later. According to his listing on AutoTrader Canada, he asked $61,000, below his purchase price, and received 2 offers, both conditional on trade-in. The truck sat for 11 weeks before it sold. His comment to Canadian Auto Dealer magazine: "I would not do it again at this price." Ford's problem is not the truck. The Lightning is a capable vehicle. The problem is that Ford priced it as if competition would never arrive, and it has arrived, certified, and available at a 37% lower entry point. The Lightning's losses are structural and publicly reported, but the situation for Ram's electric truck ambitions in Canada is worse, because Ram has not actually arrived yet, and the window may be closing before it does. Ram 1500 Rev, the truck that wasn't there. Stellantis officially paused North American production of the Ram 1500 REV in late 2024, citing demand recalibration. In Canada, 0 retail units of the Ram 1500 REV have been delivered through the first quarter of 2026. Ram is the second best-selling truck brand in Canada, consistently moving between 70,000 and 80,000 units annually across all 1,500 and heavy-duty variants. The brand's equity is enormous. But Stellantis Canada's National Dealer Council was informed in February 2026 that REV production restarts would be targeted at the US market first, with Canadian allocation timelines not yet confirmed. according to sources cited in Canadian Auto Dealer magazine. In Alberta and British Columbia, Canada's two largest truck markets by volume, Ram's electric timeline is now officially listed as TBD on Stellantis Canada's own dealer portal. While Ram holds its position, the BYD Shark 6, a plug-in hybrid full-size pickup that has cleared Transport Canada's Appendix G eligibility registry, is available in Canada starting at approximately 53,000 Canadian dollars. It qualifies for a $2,500 federal PHEV rebate. A Ram 1500 Classic, the gasoline-powered entry point, sits at approximately 46,000 to 54,000 Canadian dollars before freight and PDY. A Ram 1500 Laramie, which is the trim most Canadian buyers actually purchase according to CATA data, runs 69,000 to 74,000 Canadian dollars. A BYD Shark 6 with a comparable feature set and more technology content is currently available now at a $16,000 to $21,000 discount to the Laramie. That is not a comparison most Canadian Ram dealers want their customers doing in the showroom. A Calgary Ram fleet dealer, speaking without attribution to Automotive News Canada in March 2026, described conversations with 3 separate commercial clients who had budgeted for the REV for their mixed fleet and have now begun evaluating the BYD Shark 6 instead. The REV is not available, he was quoted as saying. The Shark 6 is. When you're running a fleet, available beats promised every time. Stellantis is losing the Canadian truck segment not because it built a bad product, but because it built a late one. In the truck market, timing is a financial decision, and the cost of being 18 months late is now being paid in lost clients who are actively in competing showrooms. Ram's problem is timing, but for the brand ranked 3rd in Canadian truck sales, the challenge is different. It is not timing, it is math. And the math on the GMC Sierra EV is the one keeping the most Canadian dealer principals awake at night. GMC Sierra EV, the premium bet in a market that no longer supports the premium. The GMC Sierra EV Denali Edition, one arrived in Canada priced at 119,998 Canadian dollars. It sold 214 units in Canada in all of 2025, according to GM Canada's registration filings. GM Canada committed to an aggressive EV transition timeline through 2025 and 2026 and has the backing of a significant Oshawa, Ontario plant retooling investment. But the Sierra EV's positioning, luxury, high-trim, $120,000 entry, means it is functionally competing against a different buyer than the volume truck market. The buyer considering a $120,000 Sierra EV in Canada is also considering a Rivian R1T, a top-trim Cybertruck, or a Ram TRX. That is a thin pool. The volume truck buyer, the 55-plus tradesperson or small business owner in Ontario or Alberta who moves 60,000 kilometers per year, has never been the Denali buyer, and GM has not yet delivered the Sierra EV trim that can reach him. The Sierra EV's lowest trim, the AT4, is priced at approximately 94,998 Canadian dollars. It qualifies for no federal IZEV rebate, as it exceeds the $55,000 vehicle cap by nearly $40,000. A Cirrus SF8, a Chinese full-size electric truck that received Transport Canada type approval in late 2025 and is entering Canadian distribution, is priced at approximately 54,000 to 58,000 Canadian dollars. It qualifies for the full $5,000 federal rebate, bringing effective cost to 49,000 to 53,000 Canadian dollars. The gap between the GM Sierra EV AT4 and the Cirrus SF8 after rebate is $42,000 to 46,000 Canadian dollars. For that difference, a Canadian buyer is not getting $42,000 worth of additional truck. Sandra Kowalchuk, a property management company owner based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, was quoted in the Globe and Mail's automotive section in January 2026, describing her fleet evaluation process. She compared a Sierra EV AT4 against the Series SF8 and the BYD Shark 6. Her conclusion: at $95,000, I expect the GM dealer to fight for my business. Instead, the Sierra EV had a 3-month wait for a test drive. The Chinese dealer had one in the lot that afternoon. She ordered 2 Series SF8 units for fleet evaluation. The Sierra EV is an exceptional engineering product placed in exactly the wrong price bracket for the market conditions of 2026. GM is not building a bad truck. It is building the wrong truck for the Canadian buyer who is now standing in front of a Chinese alternative with $40,000 still in his pocket. Before I get to the 2 nameplates that are in the most immediate financial danger, and one of them involves a Canadian federal government contract that makes this directly relevant to every Canadian taxpayer, hit that subscribe button. Next week, I'm breaking down which Chinese truck brands have the supply chain depth to still be operating Canadian dealer networks in 2030 and which ones are repeating the VinFast mistake. You need that video before you make any purchase or fleet decision. Now, Segment 4. Chevrolet Silverado EV, the volume play that cannot find volume. General Motors delivered the Chevrolet Silverado EV RST to Canadian retail buyers starting in mid-2024. In its first full calendar year of Canadian availability, it moved fewer than 400 units nationally, according to CADA monthly sales data. The Silverado name is one of the most trusted automotive brands in Canadian truck history. In its gasoline format, the Silverado 1500 consistently ranks among Canada's top 3 selling vehicles in any given month. The EV version should have been a conversion machine. Existing loyalty, established service networks, recognized nameplate. Instead, pricing anchored to the US market at $79,998 to $106,998 Canadian dollars placed it well above the IZEV rebate threshold, and GM Canada's dealer incentive structure has not compensated. Saskatchewan and Manitoba, 2 of Canada's strongest truck provinces per capita, have no provincial EV rebate programs to soften the blow. A Silverado EV RST costs $79,998 Canadian dollars before freight and PDI. A GWM Canon EV, now available through an authorized Canadian importer with a growing dealer network spanning British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario, is priced at $48,500 Canadian dollars and qualifies for the full $5,000 federal rebate. Effective cost, $43,500. The Silverado EV does not qualify for any federal rebate at that price point. The real-world cost difference to a Saskatoon or Lethbridge buyer, $36,498 Canadian dollars. At the current average finance rate of approximately 6.9% on a 72-month term in Canada, that difference represents a payment gap of over $500 per month. That is a concrete monthly number that a truck buyer making a spreadsheet decision cannot ignore. A Chevrolet dealer principal in Red Deer, Alberta, speaking to Automotive News Canada in February 2026 without authorization from GM Canada, described his Silverado EV situation directly. "I have 3 units. I've had them for 5 months. I've done 4 test drives and 0 deliveries. My floor plan cost on those 3 trucks is eating my margin on every gasoline Silverado I sell." He added that 2 of his commercial fleet clients who had expressed interest in the Silverado EV ultimately took delivery of GWM Canon EVs from a competing dealer. The $500 a month difference is not abstract to them. It's a number they can explain to their accountant. The Silverado EV's failure in Canada is not a product failure. It is a pricing failure compounded by a rebate structure that was designed in Washington, not Ottawa. GM built a truck for a subsidy environment that does not exist in most Canadian provinces. At least GM has a truck on Canadian lots. The nameplate entering Segment 5 has neither delivered Canadian units nor confirmed a retail price, and it is also the one carrying the highest expectations. The Canadian dealer collapse, how Ford, GM, and Stellantis built a $2.1 billion infrastructure trap. Between 2021 and 2024, Canadian franchise dealers of Ford, GM, and Stellantis collectively invested an estimated $2.1 billion Canadian dollars in EV readiness infrastructure, charging equipment, technician certification, service bay upgrades, and inventory financing for electric vehicles that have since dramatically underperformed sales projections. That investment was not optional. It was a condition of keeping their franchise agreements. The Canadian Automobile Dealers Association represents over 3,200 franchise dealerships nationally. Of those, approximately 1,400 carry at least one of the 3 major American truck brands. Every one of those dealers signed updated franchise agreements between 2021 and 2023 that required measurable EV infrastructure commitments as a condition of retaining their allocation rights for popular gasoline models, meaning dealers who did not invest in EV readiness risked losing access to the F-150, Silverado, and Ram 1500 inventory that actually pays their fixed costs. The investment was not a bet on the future. It was the price of staying in business in the present. Now those dealers are holding depreciating EV inventory, servicing infrastructure built for a volume that never arrived, and watching their best commercial clients walk across the street to evaluate Chinese alternatives, with no corresponding franchise agreement requiring those clients to come back. A mid-sized Canadian franchise dealer carrying Ford, GM, or Stellantis truck product invested an average of $280,000 Canadian dollars in EV infrastructure between 2022 and 2024, based on figures cited in Automotive News Canada's dealer compensation analysis published in January 2026. Financed at current commercial lending rates of approximately 7.4% over a 10-year amortization, that infrastructure costs the dealer roughly $33,000 annually in debt service before a single EV is sold. Across the 1,400 affected dealers, the collective annual carrying cost on unrecovered EV infrastructure is approximately $40 46 million Canadian dollars per year. Simultaneously, TD Economics' Q1 2026 Canadian auto sector report projected that Chinese brand truck incursion would compress average dealer front-end gross on truck transactions by 12 to 18% over the next 24 months as buyers use Chinese pricing as negotiating leverage, even when they ultimately buy American. A dealer doing 400 truck transactions per year at a $3,200 average gross who absorbs a 15% compression loses $192,000 in annual gross profit. Add the $33,000 infrastructure carrying cost, and that dealer is looking at a $225,000 annual swing in operating performance, roughly the equivalent of eliminating one full-time service advisor, one sales manager, and all discretionary marketing spend simultaneously. Brian Fafard, dealer principal at a tri-brand Ford, Lincoln, and GM store in Lethbridge, Alberta, was quoted in Canadian Auto Dealer magazine in February 2026, describing the decision he is now facing. He confirmed his store had spent $310,000 on EV infrastructure over 3 years, was carrying 4 unsold electric truck units on a floor plan that was costing him approximately $1,400 per unit per month, and had been approached by both GWM and BYD distributors about adding a Chinese franchise to his existing property. "The math on the Chinese brand is better than the math I'm living right now," he said. "That is not something I ever expected to say out loud." Fafard had not yet signed a Chinese franchise agreement at time of publication, but confirmed he had requested full financial disclosure packages from both distributors. The threat to American truck dominance in Canada is not arriving through a dramatic sales collapse. It is arriving through the slow financial suffocation of the dealer networks that have sustained American brands for 3 decades. When a Lethbridge Ford dealer is running the numbers on a GWM franchise, not because he wants to, but because the infrastructure math requires him to, the structural advantage American brands assumed was permanent is already gone. The brands themselves may survive. The dealer network ecosystem that made them dominant in Canada may not. The individual segments, Lightning losses, rev delays, Sierra EV pricing, Silverado EV volume failure, dealer network compression, are not separate stories. They are the same story told from 5 different positions. The outro is where it converges. The Canadian truck trap is not a prediction. It is a description of what is already happening. Ford, GM, and Stellantis did not lose the Canadian truck market. They are losing the Canadian truck dealer network, the 400+ stores that built their equity over 30 years on American iron and are now, for the first time, doing math on Chinese alternatives. The infrastructure gap, the rebate exclusion, and the $27,000 to $36,000 price difference are not closing in the next 12 months. If you are a Canadian fleet operator or a commercial buyer evaluating a truck purchase in 2026, the honest recommendation is this: do not pay the American premium for an EV transition that is not delivered. The Chinese alternatives are on Canadian lots, certified, and serviceable today. Do you think the Ford dealer network stabilizes by 2028, or does Chinese brand adoption in Canada cross 10% of truck volume before then? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one. Next week, which Chinese truck brands have the financial backing to maintain Canadian dealer network through 2030, and which ones are already showing the VinFast warning signs? You cannot miss that. Thanks for watching.